Need help with GED social studies? Well, in this video, I'm going to walk you through a practice test that I put together for you to help you get an idea of the kinds of questions you'll get on GED social studies, and I'm also going to teach you how to beat them so that you can maximize your score. Hi, this is Parker from Test Prep Champions, teaching you how to pass the GED fast so that you can move on to bigger and better things in life. Whether the GED is a stepping stone for you to go on for college, or if you want to go get a better job, or if you just want that personal satisfaction from knowing that you did something positive with your life, that's what I'm here to help you with, and we're going to get started with social studies right now. Question 1. The Constitution of the USA was signed on September 17, 1787 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The Constitution is a document which states the goals of the nation as envisioned by the Founding Fathers. The first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution are called the Bill of Rights. And the question says, place a dot on the timeline above on the year when the U.S. Constitution was signed. Now obviously you can't really put a dot on the screen, but just I want you to pick out where you would write a dot if you could, and pause the video, try to figure this one out, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so basically what you have to see here is that it tells you in the question that in 1787 that is when the Constitution was signed. So you basically have to look down here on the graph and you have to look between the year 1780 and 1790, and hopefully you saw that it would be somewhere around where my red dot is. Okay, so obviously you couldn't really write the dot since this is done through the computer, but as long as you put your dot, or you would have put your dot somewhere near where my red dot is, then you consider the answer correct. Okay, question 2 says, which of the following is supported by the data on the graph? A, from 2016 to 2018, exports increased but imports decreased. B, from 2016 to 2018, both exports and imports decreased. C, from 2018 to 2019, imports decreased. Or D, 2018 to 2019, imports increased. So pause the video now, try to figure this out, and then we'll go over it. Reading graphs is a really important skill for GED social studies, so let me give you a few tips here to give you a strategy to use. Now, you want to do what I call reading the TLC, and TLC here stands for the title, the labels, and the challenge, also known as the question. All right. And the title and the labels are going to give you the big picture, and then the question or the challenge is going to tell you what part of the graph to focus on. So what I want you to do is to ignore everything that's not relevant on the graph to answering the question. I just want you to look at the part of the graph that's relevant to the question. All right. And this is really a big tip. This slide right here is really going to help you out with the social studies and also science and other sections of the GED. But as a general rule of thumb, you always want to follow the direction of the line on the graph. All right, so as general rules of thumb, a line that's going up is showing increase, a line that's going down is showing decrease, and a flat line means no change. Okay, so here basically what we want to do, so from 2016 through 2018, it's telling us exports increase but imports decrease. So let's see if that's true. So what we want to do is we want to just focus on that specific date range, right? So let me highlight that date range here, 2016 through 2018. So I'm doing this because on any of these questions where it comes down to reading graphs, whenever they give you a range like this, that's basically telling us that you can ignore everything else. So whatever's happening over here on this part of the graph, we can ignore that, and we just want to look at what's happening in between 2016 and 2018. So just in between these two black lines, right? So we know that the blue line is our exports, and that red is our imports. So we want to look at the general direction of both of these lines. So for exports, right, the line for exports, it's going up, and the line for imports is also going up. All right, so both imports and exports were increasing during this time, so A is false. Now B is also asking us about 2016 through 2018. All right, so B says both exports and imports decreased, and like we just said, the line for both imports and the line for exports are going up. So B is out. All right, so let's check C now. So C is asking us to look at the range from 2018 to 2019. So again, you're not going to be able to draw lines like this on your test, obviously, but I'm just doing this because I want you to focus your attention just on what's happening on the graphs in between this range here of 2018 to 2019. Again, there's no need to look at what's happening anywhere else on the graph. And so we want to see, is this true or false? Did imports decrease? Well, we want to look at the color red again because red represents imports. And what direction is this line going here? So the line here is going down, which represents decrease, so this is going to be correct. And C is the correct answer. Okay, so the third question, we have a chart here, and the text reads, the gross domestic product, GDP, growth rate compares the year-over-year change in economic output. It measures a country's speed of economic growth. Now, the following data is from the country China, and it gives us years here. It gives us 2020, 2019, 2018, 2017, and we see the GDP growth in percent for each year, and also the annual change in percent. And the question says, for the years listed in the table, what was the mean GDP growth? Write your answer in the box. So pause the video, try to figure this out, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so all we have to do to answer this, we're going to take all of these values and we're going to find the average of them. So whenever you hear a question on the GED that says what was the mean, they're always asking you to calculate the average. All right, so that's a good point that you should take away from this video, is that the word mean, it just means the average. And how do we find the average? Well, that's what I'm going to show you here. But basically, you want to take all of the numbers in a data set, and you want to take all of those numbers and you want to add them up, and you want to then count up the total number of numbers in the data set, and you're going to divide by that number. So I know there's somebody out there scratching their head saying, you know, that explanation is getting me more and more confused. So let me show you how to do it. So basically, the first step would be we're going to take all of the numbers, right? And we're going to add them up and we're going to divide, okay? And let me walk you through this because my handwriting is not the best. But basically, we're going to take, in 2020, the GDP growth, which was negative 3.49. And in 2019, it's 2.16. Then we're going to go to 2018, and so we just have 3. And in 2017, we have 2.33, okay? So we want to add these up, and then we want to divide down here by the total number of numbers in our data set. So we just count them up. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? So we divide by 4. So you would just take your calculator, add these all up, divide by 4, and let's see what we get. Okay, and so the answer here is 1, right? So 1% is the answer. Let me put that in the box. Okay, so now we're looking at the same exact data. The only thing that's different is this time I'm asking you to tell me what was the median GDP growth in percent. And I want you to write your answer in the box. Obviously, you can't actually do that. And let's say, I don't care how you round it. If you want, you can round it to the nearest tenth, but I don't care how you round it. Let's just have you try to get the right answer. If you want something for reference, round to the nearest tenth, but I don't really care how you round it. Just see if you can get the right answer. Pause the video, and then we'll go over it. So we were just talking about the mean, and hopefully you learned, if you didn't know already, that the mean just simply means the average, and hopefully now you know how to calculate that. And the skill is going to be useful for calculating the median, but it's a little bit different here. And a lot of people remember before from high school or whenever you were in school that the median has something to do with the middle number. So a lot of people will just look at the numbers and they'll just go right to the middle number. And you're on the right track, but that's not exactly correct. And again, I don't have a tablet or anything to write with, so my writing comes out a little scratchy because I'm writing on my ancient laptop here. But basically, to find the median, the first step is you want to take all the numbers here and put them in order from smallest to largest. That's extremely important to do that. Don't forget to do that. You'll get the question wrong. All right, put them in order from smallest to largest. I've seen so many students that just go and look for the middle number without doing that first. So do that. And when we put them in order from smallest to largest, we would do negative 3.49, then 2.16, then 2.33, then 3. All right, so now if you look at this, all right, we see that there's an even number of numbers here. Okay, so whenever there's an even number of numbers, we have to take the two numbers that are in the center, which is 2.16 and 2.33, and we have to add those two numbers up. and then we're going to divide by 2. Okay, so if it had been an odd number of numbers that we were working with here, we would be able to just put them in order from smallest to largest. And after doing that, we could just simply look and see the middle number, and that would be the end of the question. But since we have an even number, we're going to have to add those 2 numbers up, and we're going to divide by 2. So in other words, we're going to take the average of those 2 numbers. Okay, so using my calculator, I got the answer 2.245. And again, I don't really care how you rounded it. I just am interested in, can you get this number, or if you round a little bit differently, let's say if we do to the nearest tenth, what we would do is we would just say 2.2. Okay, so for the next question, you have a chart here that gives you years, gives you the names of certain documents, and gives you a summary of each document. And then we have the following excerpt, and the excerpt says, "And whereas it is requisite and necessary that some further provision be made for securing our religion, laws, and liberties from and after the death of His Majesty and the Princess Anne of Denmark, and in default of issue of the body of the said Princess and of His Majesty respectively, be it enacted by the King's most excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the Lords Spiritual and Temporal, and Commons and Parliament assembled, and by the authority of the same, that whosoever shall hereafter come to the possession of this crown shall join in communion with the Church of England as by law established." So then the question reads, which document did the above excerpt most likely come from? A, the Act of Settlement, B, the Treaty of Paris, or C, Royal Proclamation. So pause the video, try to figure this out, and then we'll go over it. Okay, let's go over this. So right off the bat, there's a little trick here. So hopefully you saw the word up here. It says parliamentary or parliament. And down here you might see the word parliament. So this won't always work, but it sometimes works. Whenever you see different words that'll match like this, like up here in the summary of the Act of Settlement, we see this, that it strengthens the guarantees for ensuring a parliamentary system. And we also see that it goes on to talk about parliament here in the excerpt. So we would assume that logically, well, this must come from the Act of Settlement. You could also just kind of use process of elimination here. You'd understand that the Treaty of Paris, that has to do with France and Britain, and the Royal Proclamation has to do with France and Britain and certain territories. The passage didn't say anything about anything that had to do with this conflict between France and Britain. Therefore, that would leave the Act of Settlement. So there's a couple ways to think about this. You could also just read the passage here and think about it and think, well, this kind of has to do more with strengthening guarantees for ensuring a parliamentary system of government versus a conflict. So A is the correct answer here. Okay, next question. So now we have a graphic and text. And so the text reads, in the 2020 U.S. presidential election in Georgia, the Republican presidential candidate received 49.24% of the vote, whereas the Democratic presidential candidate received 49.47% of the vote. In red counties, the majority of the voters voted for the Republican candidate, whereas in the blue counties, the majority voted for the Democratic candidate. So the question says, based on the text and picture, which of the following is true? A, the majority of voters in southern Georgia voted for the Republican candidate. B, the majority of voters in southern Georgia voted for the Democratic candidate. C, the majority of voters in northern Georgia voted for the Democratic candidate. Or D, the Democratic candidate won Georgia by a large margin. So pause the video, try to figure this out, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so basically here, the key is where it says in the passage that red counties were Republican majority and blue counties represent areas with Democratic majority. So it shows us also north, south, west, and east parts of Georgia, relatively speaking here. And so basically what you have to see is that in southern Georgia, we see a little bit of blue here and there, but it is mainly red. And so therefore, the majority of voters in southern Georgia did vote for a Republican candidate. Okay, so the next question, the text up on the top paragraph is exactly the same, but the bottom little blurb reads, the capital of Georgia is Atlanta. Atlanta is located in Fulton County. In Fulton County, 72.57% of voters voted for the Democratic candidate. Which county on the map is most likely Fulton County, Georgia? Now we see counties marked A, B, C, and D. So go ahead, pause the video, try to figure this out, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so basically the idea here, again, it goes back to blue and red counties, and the passage tells us that the red counties are Republican, Democratic counties are blue, and we're told that Fulton County is a Democratic majority county, in which case that means it would be blue. And so we see B is a red county, C is a red county, D is a red county, but A is a blue county. So logically we would conclude that that's Fulton County, which is where Atlanta is. Okay, this question involves a pie chart, and the question says, the data in the chart above shows the percentage of votes in the state of Georgia that each candidate won. Which of the following conclusions can be drawn from the above data? A. Joe Biden won Georgia and won by a large margin. B. Donald Trump won Georgia. C. Joe Jorgensen received significantly fewer votes than Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Or D. None of the above. Pause the video, figure this out, and we'll go over this. Okay, so basically here, when it comes to answer A, the first part is supported by the data. Joe Biden won Georgia, right? Because we see that candidate Joe Biden won 49.5% of the vote in Georgia, which would give him the majority. However, he did not win by a large margin, right? And we know he didn't win by a large margin because look at the presidential candidate Donald Trump. He had 49.2% of the vote, so it's a very, very close election, right? You see that the percentage of the vote that Donald Trump had is in red, and Biden's percentage is in blue, and it's very close, so it was a very, 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 very small margin according to the data. So A is false. B, Donald Trump won Georgia. That's not what the data supports because it says he got 49.2% of the vote versus 49.5%. And then C, Joe Jorgensen received significantly fewer votes than Donald Trump and Joe Biden. This is actually the correct answer because we see this little orange sliver here is what Joe Jorgensen won, which is significantly less than what either Donald Trump or Joe Biden won. Okay, next question. So we have a new passage, and this one reads, the Constitution of the United States of America was signed on September 17, 1787 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Some believe that the Constitution lacks specific guarantees of personal liberty and lacks specific limits on government power, and thus wanted to add a Bill of Rights to the Constitution. The Anti-Federalists wanted a Bill of Rights, whereas the Federalists opposed a Bill of Rights. Now we see two quotes and two pictures here. So the first is a picture of Thomas Jefferson, and here's the quote. It says, a Bill of Rights is what the people are entitled to against every government on earth, general or particular, and what no just government should refuse. So then Alexander Hamilton's quote says, I go further and affirm that bills of rights in the sense and in the extent in which they are contended for are not only unnecessary in the proposed Constitution, but would even be dangerous. And the question reads, based on the passage in quotes, was Thomas Jefferson a Federalist or an Anti-Federalist? What about Alexander Hamilton? Alright, so in this case, just think of this as like a write your own answer type of question here. I didn't want to put multiple choice answers because I couldn't fit it all on screen here, but just think of this as like a fill-in-the-blank answer where I want you to think about this. Tell me, was Thomas Jefferson an Anti-Federalist or a Federalist? And do the same for Alexander Hamilton based off of the passage and based off of these quotes. So pause the video, think about it, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so really this is just a matter of just reading here where it says Anti-Federalists wanted a Bill of Rights, and Jefferson's quote indicates that he wanted a Bill of Rights, so therefore Jefferson is the Anti-Federalist, and Hamilton's quote says that he basically opposes a Bill of Rights, and Federalists oppose a Bill of Rights, so therefore Hamilton is a Federalist.